The sun in Madrid was relentless that afternoon, painting golden streaks across the tiled rooftops. Isabella tightened her apron behind the cafe's counter, wiping sweat from her brow. She had been working double shifts at Café de Sol since spring, ever since her mother's health had started declining. Her life was a predictable loop of early mornings, strong coffee, and tired smiles. Until that letter arrived. It came tucked beneath the daily pile of bills and ads, handwritten in elegant loops. The return address was unfamiliar, but the name on the envelope stopped her breath. Lucia Fernandez. Isabella hadn't seen or heard from Lucia in almost 7 years. They had been inseparable once, like sisters, two reckless hearts chasing sunsets through the alleys of Lavapiés, whispering secrets beneath the viaduct at midnight. Then, without warning, Lucia vanished. No calls. No messages. Nothing. With trembling fingers, Isabella opened the letter. "Isa, I need your help. Please don't tell anyone I've written to you. Not even Mateo. I know I've got no right to ask you this, but I'm in trouble. The kind you can't run from. If you can meet me, come to the abandoned metro station near Chimbery. Midnight. Don't be late." Isabella read it twice, then a third time. Her pulse thudded behind her ears. Lucia was alive. And she was in danger. She locked the letter away in the drawer, barely noticing the espresso machine hissing behind her. Thoughts of Lucia flooded her mind, her defiant grin, the scar on her knuckle, the whispered dream of disappearing one day, for good. The rest of the day passed in a daze. When Mateo, her childhood friend and now a Madrid police officer, dropped by for his usual court-adieu, she struggled to meet his eyes. He would want to know why she was acting strange. But if she told him, she might betray Lucia again. That night, with the streets of Madrid cloaked in silence, Isabella made her way towards Chimbery. The old station had been shut down for decades, known more as a tourist curiosity than anything else. But when she slipped past the rusted gates and into the shadowed tunnels, the chill in the air told her this was no tourist destination tonight. She waited in the dark, heart pounding. At exactly midnight, footsteps echoed in the distance. A figure emerged, older, leaner, and more haunted than the girl she remembered, but unmistakably Lucia. "Isa," Lucia whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't know who else to trust. And with those words, Isabella knew. Whatever came next, her life was about to change forever. Lucia looked over her shoulder twice before stepping closer. Her eyes darted through the shadows as if someone might be following her. Isabella reached out, gently touching her arm. "You're freezing," she whispered. Lucia flinched, but did not pull away. "I don't have long. I shouldn't have come, but I didn't know where else to go." "Tell me what's going on," Isabella said. "Start from the beginning." Lucia hesitated, then exhaled. "There's no time for the beginning. All you need to know is I've seen something I shouldn't have. And now they want me gone." "Who are they?" Lucia shook her head. "I can't say. If I tell you too much, they'll come after you too." Isabella's heart pounded. The tunnels around them felt suddenly claustrophobic. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. "Why now, after all these years?" "Because you're the only one I trust. And because I need you to help me disappear." The words hung between them like fog. Isabella blinked. "Disappear?" Lucia pulled a worn envelope from her coat and handed it over. Inside were photographs. Grainy, black and white shots taken from a distance. Men in uniform. Trucks with no license plates. Boxes marked with strange symbols. One image showed a man she recognized. A high-ranking official Mateo had once pointed out on the news. "What is this?" "It's what I found while working at the storage yard in Arganda. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. And I took photos. Then I ran." Isabella looked closer. She had no idea what the boxes contained, but Lucia's fear told her everything. This was dangerous. Bigger than either of them. "You need to go to the police," she said softly. Lucia's laugh was hollow. "The police?" "Isa, I'm being hunted by people who work with them. If I turn myself in, I'll disappear for real, and not the kind I want." Isabella stepped back, the weight of the moment sinking in. Helping Lucia meant risking everything.
Her job.
Her safety. Even Mateo. Why not go to someone else? Because you know Madrid. You know how to move without being seen. And Lucia paused. Because I never stopped thinking about you. I thought maybe, even after all this time, you might still care. A long silence fell. Then Isabella nodded once.
Slowly. All right.
I'll help you. But we do this my way. No mistakes. Lucia's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, Isa. They moved through the tunnels in silence, heading for an exit Lucia had used before. Just before they reached the surface, Isabella's phone buzzed. A message from Mateo. Are you home? Need to talk. She stared at the screen, the light cold against her skin. Was it just coincidence? Or had someone already noticed? She slipped the phone back into her pocket. Whatever this was, it was too late to back out now. By the time they emerged from the tunnels into the quiet alleys behind Lavapiés, the sky had turned deep navy. Streetlights buzzed above, and the hum of late-night traffic drifted through the air. Lucia kept her hood up, eyes scanning every shadow. Isabella moved with forced calm, her mind racing ahead. She had told Mateo she was going to see an old friend from university. She hoped that lie would hold, at least for now. They slipped into a tiny cafe that was just about to close. The owner barely looked up as they passed through the front and into the narrow bathroom at the back. Isabella locked the door, turned the faucet on full, and leaned against the wall. Lucia crouched on the floor, pulling a crumpled map from her coat pocket. I've been here, she said, pointing to a red circle drawn near the River Manzanares. There's an abandoned warehouse just off the bypass. No cameras, no guards. I stayed there for 2 nights, but last night I saw someone. A silhouette on the opposite roof. Watching me. Did they follow you? I don't think so. But I didn't wait to find out. That's when I called you. Isabella knelt beside her. We can't go back there. It's too risky. We'll need a new place, somewhere they'd never think to look. Lucia folded the map and tucked it back into her coat. Where? Isabella paused. Her mind spun through places, old hostels, construction sites, even the empty attic above the restaurant she used to work at. Then it hit her. There's a derelict villa in El Escorial. My aunt used to own it before she moved to Valencia. It's off the grid. If we can get there by sunrise, we might have a few days before anyone realizes. Lucia nodded, grateful. But as they stepped outside, Isabella noticed a man across the street lighting a cigarette. He did not glance their way. Yet he stood too still. Too casual. She gripped Lucia's arm. Don't run. Just walk. They turned the corner, their pace steady. Behind them, footsteps echoed faintly, keeping time. A few streets down, they ducked into a small hotel lobby. Isabella flashed her ID, requested a room quickly in Spanish, and handed over cash. The receptionist barely looked at her. Perfect. Once inside the room, Isabella bolted the door. Someone is following us, she whispered. Lucia froze. I think we have one chance. If we take the first train to El Escorial at dawn, we might shake them. But you have to stay hidden until then. Lucia nodded, curling up on the bed like a frightened child. Isabella sat beside her, staring out the window. Her phone buzzed again. Mateo, are you all right? You seem different lately. She did not reply. She simply turned the screen over, watching their reflections blur in the dark glass. Something about this ran deeper than even Lucia had said. She could feel it in her bones. Something unseen was moving around them, and it would not stop until Lucia was silenced. The sun had not yet risen when Isabella and Lucia slipped out of the hotel and headed towards the Atocha train station. The streets of Madrid were hushed, bathed in a ghostly glow of the street lamps. Their footsteps echoed against the cold pavement as they kept their heads low and their eyes forward. Inside the station, it was quiet. A few early commuters lingered by the vending machines, some half asleep on benches. Isabella bought 2 one-way tickets to El Escorial using coins, avoiding her credit card. They boarded the train just minutes before departure. The carriage was nearly empty. Lucia took a seat by the window, her hood still up. Isabella sat beside her, watching every person who entered. As the train pulled away, the city lights gave way to rolling hills and fog-shrouded fields. Lucia leaned her head against the glass, eyes wide open. "I dreamt of fire last night," she said softly. "I was standing in a room full of documents. Then everything caught alight, but I couldn't move. I was trapped." Isabella did not reply immediately. She watched the countryside slide past. "What are they trying to hide, Lucia?" Lucia pressed her lips together, then finally said, "It's more than just records. There were files on real people, test results, experiments, names of children." Isabella's stomach dropped. "Children?" Lucia nodded slowly. "I recognized one of the names. A boy who went missing when I was in secondary school. No one ever found him. I thought it was just gossip back then." "Do you have any proof?" "Only fragments. I didn't have time to copy everything before they caught on. But there's one name I remember, the head of the department. Dr. Alvarez. He's the one I overheard giving orders to erase the files." Isabella clenched her fists. That name rang a bell. Her mother used to work in the same building before she passed away. A sudden jolt shook the train, and a man in a gray coat stumbled into their carriage from the one behind. He scanned the seats quickly, then walked on. Isabella's heart pounded. Lucia whispered, "He's been on since Chamartin." Isabella nodded subtly. "We get off at the next stop." "Not El Escorial. We can't lead them straight to the villa." The train slowed as it approached a rural platform. They rose together, slipping out just as the doors opened. The platform was deserted. Only wind and the sound of birds greeted them. They waited, crouched behind a row of bushes, as the train continued northward. A shadow moved past the window of their old carriage. The man in the gray coat. Isabella let out a breath. "We walk from here," she said. "It's a long way, but safer than being tracked." Lucia looked down the empty road stretching beyond the tracks. "Where does it go?" "To the edge of the forest," Isabella replied. "Then we disappear." And so they began walking, their shoes crunching gravel underfoot, as the early sun began to break over the hills of Madrid. Neither of them spoke. The silence was safer. But somewhere behind them, deep in the trees, another silence was stirring, the kind that waits. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sun was high and the shadows were shrinking. Their shoes were covered in dust, their clothes damp with sweat, but they did not slow down. The silence of the countryside was deceptive. They knew it could be broken at any moment. Isabella led the way along an old dirt path that curled into a slope. Pines stretched tall around them, their scent thick in the warm air. Birds called in the distance, and somewhere far behind, a faint drone echoed. A car engine, too far to tell if it was following. Lucia glanced behind her every few steps. "Are you sure about this place?" Isabella gave a short nod. "My mother used to bring me here. It belonged to a friend of hers, a man who owed her a favor. He died years ago. The place should be empty." They pushed through a thicket of wild shrubs, and there it was, a stone villa nestled between the trees, its shutters drawn, the roof sagging slightly under age. Ivy crept up the walls. The silence here was deeper, as if the place had been forgotten. Isabella reached under a flower pot by the door and pulled out an old key. "Still here," she whispered. Inside, the air was stale with dust and age. Furniture was draped in white cloths, and a musty carpet greeted their steps. Lucia pulled off her hoodie and walked slowly through the living room. It looked sun-touched. Isabella opened a window and let the breeze sweep in. He was a recluse. My mother said he kept things secret, even from himself. They checked each room, then locked all doors and windows. In a back room, they found a desk with papers still scattered across it. Books on human biology, legal texts in Latin, and maps of the Madrid region. Lucia ran her fingers along a page in one of the journals. "Look at this." He was tracking disappearances, matching names to dates and locations. Isabella joined her.
"Wait.
"That's the same month my mother fell ill. She said it was just stress, but she quit her job right after." They stared at each other.
He knew something, Lucia said.
Maybe he tried to warn her. They set up their phones but left them off. They would not risk being tracked. Lucia pulled out a flash drive from her bag, one of the few she had managed to hide before escaping. She plugged it into an old laptop they found in the villa, remarkably still working. Isabella stood by the window, staring out through the pines. She felt something twist in her chest. A memory. Her mother's voice, trembling on the phone. If anything happens to me, don't go to the police. There are people you cannot trust. Now it made sense. Lucia turned to her. There's more on here than I remembered. Test subjects. Coordinates. Payments. Payments. Isabella echoed.
Yes.
Made to the same name over and over. Dr. Alvarez. And another. Mateo. Isabella's breath caught. Mateo? He was my godfather. She rushed to the desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was an envelope, yellow with age. Her name was on it. Lucia watched as Isabella opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated 12 years ago. My dear Isabella, if you're reading this, then it means everything I feared has happened. Her hands began to shake. Lucia stepped closer. What does it say? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. She knew. My mother knew all of it. Outside, the wind picked up through the trees, rattling the window panes. Somewhere, deep within the woods, the silence shifted again. They were not alone. As the day wore on, the golden light of the afternoon filtered through the pine needles, casting long shadows across the villa floor. Isabella sat on the edge of the old sofa, her mother's letter spread across her lap, rereading every line as if she could pull more answers from the faded ink. Lucia moved quietly through the house, pulling curtains closed, checking every lock again. The forest, once a place of escape, now felt like a trap. They spoke little, both weighed down by what the letter had revealed. I think she was trying to protect me, Isabella said at last, her voice hoarse. By never telling me. Lucia nodded from across the room. But someone found out. That's why she disappeared. A chill passed between them. Isabella folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. At sunset, the light turned red gold, spilling into the cracks of the old wood and casting strange patterns along the walls. They sat in silence, listening to the quiet hum of nature. But then, it changed.
A sound.
Twigs snapping. Lucia stood quickly and reached for the drawer where they had hidden an old kitchen knife. Isabella moved to the window and peered out through a thin gap in the curtain. At the edge of the clearing stood a figure. Motionless.
Tall.
Wearing a dark coat. He did not move. He simply stood there. Lucia hissed, Can he see us? Isabella shook her head. Not unless he knows where to look. The figure raised one arm.
Slowly.
Then pointed toward the villa. Lucia stepped back. Is he alone? Isabella squinted. I can't tell. But then the figure turned and walked away. Not hurried.
Calm.
As if he knew they were watching. Lucia closed the curtain in a snap. That wasn't random. He knew. Then we have to go, said Isabella. Tonight. They moved fast. Packed only what they needed. The letter, the flash drive, a few supplies. Night fell quickly beneath the trees, and the villa grew darker with each passing minute. Before they left, Isabella turned back toward the room where her mother's secrets had been kept. Thank you, she whispered. They crept out the back door and into the woods. No torches, only the moonlight. Branches scratched their arms and faces as they moved, but neither of them complained. Every noise now felt louder. Every owl call, every gust of wind. Hours passed. They were halfway down the hillside when they saw a light. Not from the stars, from a fire. A small campsite. And voices. They dropped to the ground and crawled closer. 4 men. 2 tents. One of them was on the phone. No sign yet, he was saying. But she'll come back. She always does. Lucia's breath caught in her throat. Isabella pressed a hand to her back, calming her. They lay there, hidden by bushes, listening. The man continued. She doesn't know the full story. If she did, she'd burn everything down. Then silence. Then laughter. Lucia's hands balled into fists. "We need to find another way out," Isabella whispered. "They're waiting for us." As they moved silently away, hearts pounding, Lucia whispered back, "What if it's not just about her?" Isabella looked at her sharply. "What if this has always been about him?" They didn't speak again until the trees swallowed them whole. They did not sleep that night. After leaving the campsite behind, Isabella and Lucia kept moving, their feet aching from the rocky slope, their clothes damp with sweat and dew. By dawn, they reached a small, abandoned train station at the base of the mountain. Rusty tracks curved into the mist. A single crumbling bench sat under a broken sign. Isabella collapsed onto it, exhausted. Lucia scanned the horizon. "We can't stay here long." Isabella nodded. "I know," but neither moved for a while. Their thoughts were too loud. When the sun finally rose above the hills, they decided to follow the tracks. Somewhere along the line, it would lead to a village, a road, or at least a signal. Hours passed. Then, just before midday, they found it. A dusty shed beside the tracks, its door chained shut. Faded letters on the wood read Estación de San Javier, barely visible. Lucia approached it first, tugging at the chain. "It's locked." Isabella looked around and spotted a small, broken window high on the side. "I'll go in." Lucia started to protest, but Isabella was already climbing. She slipped through the gap and landed inside with a soft thud. The air smelled of rust and old paper. Inside, the shed was filled with forgotten crates and shelves. Dust floated in the air like snowflakes. But in the far corner, half covered by an old blanket, stood a metal cabinet. Isabella approached slowly and pulled the blanket away. The cabinet door was slightly ajar. Inside, a stack of folders. Faded blue, tied with string. She pulled one out and opened it. Names.
Codes.
A list of deliveries. Payments. And stamped across the top. Confidential. Gobierno, interior. She froze. Then opened another. This one had photographs. Blurred surveillance images.
Dates.
Names circled in red ink. Her mother's name was one of them. And just below it, another. Mateo Calderon. Isabella gasped. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. There were letters, too. Warnings. Orders. All signed with the same initials.
M.C.
She dropped the folder as if it burned. Lucia called from outside. "Isabella? What is it?" Isabella climbed back out, clutching the folder. "You were right," she said, breathless. "It wasn't just about her. It's always been about him." Lucia opened the folder and scanned the contents. Her eyes widened. "He worked for them?" "More than that," Isabella said. "He let it." They sat in silence again, the wind rustling dry leaves around their feet. Then Lucia whispered, "So, why did he want you protected?" Isabella met her eyes. "Because I was his mistake." The air between them shifted. If Mateo had led whatever secret operation this was, and if her mother had once been part of it, then Isabella was never just a daughter in hiding. She was the key. They had to leave.
Now.
But as they stood and packed the folders, the sound of footsteps echoed down the track. Not animals.
Boots.
Coming closer. The footsteps were heavy and steady, echoing closer with each breath. Isabella grabbed Lucia's arm. "We have to hide. Now." They darted behind the shed, pressing their backs to the cold, cracked wall. Their hearts pounded like drums in their chests. From the shadows, two men appeared. One wore a dark jacket with a badge pinned to his chest. The other carried a radio, speaking quietly into it. "We know you're here," the first man said, his voice low and urgent. Isabella held her breath, clutching the folders tightly. Lucia's fingers trembled. Suddenly, the radio crackled. "Target sighted near the old station. Move in." The men advanced, scanning every corner. Isabella whispered, "We need to run." Lucia nodded. With a shared glance, they bolted down the tracks, stones crunching beneath their feet. The men gave chase. The mountain air was sharp and cold as they pushed forward, adrenaline fueling their flight. They turned sharply around a bend and slipped into a narrow cave opening hidden by vines. Inside, darkness swallowed them. The only sound was their ragged breathing. They stayed still, listening. Outside, muffled voices and footsteps faded slowly. After what felt like hours, they emerged. Lucia wiped sweat from her brow. "We can't keep running forever," she said. Isabella looked back towards the village lights flickering in the distance. "We need help. We have to tell someone the truth." But who could they trust when the shadows themselves seemed to hunt them? They reached the village square, the familiar cobblestones cold beneath their feet. Isabella hurried to the town hall, hoping to find Matteo. Inside, the room was dimly lit. Matteo stood by the window, his face troubled. "Matteo," Isabella called softly. "We need your help." He turned, eyes filled with worry. "What happened?" Isabella handed him the folders. "This is why they're after us. The truth about the company's corruption." Matteo studied the papers, then sighed deeply. "We can expose them, but it will be dangerous." Lucia stepped forward. "We trusted the mayor. He's part of it." Matteo nodded grimly. "I feared as much. We must be careful whom we trust." Suddenly, the door creaked open. A man stepped in, a sly smile on his face. "Looking for me?" Isabella's heart sank. Matteo's eyes hardened. "You betrayed us." The man shrugged. "Loyalty is a luxury none of us can afford." The room tensed, the walls closing in. Isabella clutched Lucia's hand. The fight for truth was more perilous than they ever imagined. The man's eyes flickered with menace as he stepped closer. Isabella's mind raced. She knew what she had to do. "Leave now," she said firmly, "or I will call the authorities." He laughed darkly. "You don't have the proof." "Not yet." Matteo stepped forward, voice steady. "We will find more, and we will stop you." Lucia squeezed Isabella's hand. Together. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside. Voices shouted warnings. The townspeople had come, alerted by Matteo. The corrupt man realized he was cornered. He sneered, then vanished into the shadows. Isabella felt a wave of relief, but knew the fight was far from over. She looked at Lucia and Matteo. "We must protect each other, no matter the cost." That night, Isabella made the hardest choice of all. To keep her loved ones safe, she would sacrifice her own peace. Her loyalty was tested beyond limits. But it was the only way.